Hey, lovies. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day and thanks for joining me again. All right, so today we're going to continue in our series on VA disability compensation claims. Now, if you joined me in the previous videos and were able to watch the first video, we covered who is qualified to file a disability claim. So, just a quick review, it covered the three criteria for eligibility. You should be a veteran. You should have a discharge that is other than dishonorable. And then you should also have a current disability that is service connected. And then the second video in the series talked about the types of service connection. So check that out if you haven't already. And then I also touched on going ahead and completing a va.gov login if you haven't done so, and processing your intent to file to lock in that effective date. All right, so today, the third video in the series is going to be all about gathering the required evidence to support your claim. So when we gather evidence, I talked to you about requesting medical records, and in this video, the description will house all of the information on where you can request your medical records. There is a list of potential ways to file a disability claim. All of that information will be in the description. But if you haven't done so, you need to request your medical records if you don't have them. And if you don't have them, it still doesn't mean you can't go ahead and process your intent to file to lock in that date. It just means that you'll be waiting for your medical records to get your supporting documentation. All right. So service records. All right. Make sure you have a copy of your DD-214. That will show you the places that you've served, especially if you don't recall all of the arenas that you were deployed to. Check your your DD-214. See where you have served. Ensure that none of those places are on the presumptives list that we talked about in the previous videos. And if they are, you want to make sure and check that presumptive list to see if you have any of those disabilities. And if you do, you want to review your medical records to see the extent of those disabilities and add them to your list of claims to file with the VA. All right. So now we're gathering evidence. We're going to start looking at what disabilities you have that are service related that you can include in your disability claim. All right. Now you can also look at your current medical records, even if you don't have your service records. Look at any disease or injuries that you have currently that began when you were in military service. Or if you know that there is something that happened specifically in military service, write that down so that you can review it to see if it's something that you can add to your VA claim. Next is documentation. Now for these disabilities that you may currently have and you want to file a claim for because you think they may be related to service, you may want to get your current doctor, talk to your current doctor about it. If you are a VA patient and you only get your medical care through the Department of Veterans Affairs, it might be difficult for you to do this with a VA doctor. So that might mean you may need to visit a doctor outside of the VA and talk to them about your disabilities that you have and explain to them that, you are a veteran. However, a lot of times VA doctors do not provide medical nexus as it relates to service injuries for some reason. So I've heard some say that it is against not against, but a conflict of interest. Don't really understand how that is the case because they are your VA doctors. They are better equipped to say what medical conditions you have, and especially looking at your records and how far back they go and if they would relate to your time in service. However, a lot of them will not. So that just, be aware that that might be an avenue you need to take, is going outside of the VA and seeing a doctor and having them provide that nexus documentation where they state that whatever the condition is that you have is linked to your time in service. And remember, the nexus documentation is as likely as not, is at least as likely as not. So that documentation would have to contain verbiage that states that the doctor that's overseeing you feels that the condition that you have currently is at least as likely as not related to your military service. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. And also, now you want to start formulating your lay statement, which is the statement that you will provide to the VA that supports whatever medical conditions you have, your time in service, where you served, and how it's related to your service. So you want to provide statements of fact in your lay statement. So you're basically writing to tell them who, what, when, where, how, and why, what happened to you, where you were when it happened, what type of training you conducted, if that is relative, where you trained, your duty stations. You also want to include your MOS if that's a factor. Some MOSs have more exposure than others to certain chemicals or toxins, or just different environmental factors are associated with certain MOSs. You want to make sure that if you were at a base that is conceded to have been contaminated, that you include that information as well. And then do a summary on how all of this ties to whatever your medical condition is and that time that you spent at those various places. All right. And don't forget, in addition to your lay statement, you can also get buddies or service members who were with you at the time to write statements as well to corroborate your story and say, yes, I knew this person when, and I can corroborate their story that this happened to them at this time, etc. Because sometimes when you don't have those medical records to corroborate your story, lay statements and buddy statements will suffice once you get that medical nexus where the doctor says, yes, this condition is at least as likely as not to be associated with military service. So that's where we are now. Make sure you get all of your records together. And if you don't have medical records and you cannot, for some reason they're telling you that they don't have your medical records, you can still talk to a doctor and get a current diagnosis of whatever it is that you have, whatever disabilities or illnesses that you may have, and talk to them about, things that happened in service. Write those lay statements and gather those buddy statements. Let your doctor read them, and they can still corroborate a nexus for you if they feel that that injury or illness is service related. It doesn't mean that you always have to have medical evidence, and then the VA can review your claim to see if they feel that your disease or injury is related to service. All right, so today, gathering evidence, and don't forget to file that intent to file to lock in the effective date, and we'll be back later with the next video in the series. All right, if this is information that you find helpful, please like and subscribe and share this video with others who you think it could help, and hopefully I'll see you in the next series. All right, bye-bye. Have a great day.